Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction Company taking a look at a Hopkins Allen Model XL8 revolver that is going to be in their upcoming April of 2020 premiere auction. Hopkins Allen is an interesting company. They were kind of better businessmen than some of the other not quite top-of-the-line firearms companies during the late 1800s. The company was formed in 1867 by the two Hopkins brothers, Charles and Samuel, as well as Charles Allen. So we've got two Charleses going on here. They put in some money all together and they bought the old facilities of the Bacon Manufacturing Company in Norwich, Connecticut. Bacon had been a faltering firearms manufacturer, and these guys thought that they could do a little better, and they could, in fact. What's interesting about Hopkins Allen is as they expanded, they realized that there was good money, safe money to be made in being basically an OEM parts manufacturer. So Hopkins Allen manufactured their own guns under their own brand name, their own company name, but they also did a lot of work manufacturing parts for other companies. Probably the most notable one is they had a pretty intimate relationship with the Merwin and Hulbert Company, as well as the Evans Rifle Company. Now, the problem that arose that would impact these guns is that most of what Hopkins Allen was really known for on their own brand name were basically Saturday night specials. Very inexpensive, relatively low quality pocket guns, more or less. They did a lot of other stuff. They did rifles, they did shotguns, they did a huge variety of things, but their basic brand reputation was inexpensive and not maybe all that reliable. So that will cause them problems. But we haven't gotten to those problems quite yet. In 1877, they decided to expand their line of pistols to include what was basically a high-end Marshall revolver, something that could compete with a Colt single action or a Smith Wesson No.3. They had three versions of this. This is the Army pattern. Let's take a closer look at it. So I mentioned Merwin and Hulbert having an intimate relationship with Hopkins Allen. This comes basically in the middle of Merwin and Hulbert revolver production. The first Merwin and Hulberts were introduced in 1876. This is introduced in 1877 or thereabouts. And there are a couple elements on here that are very clearly copied off of the Merwin. Just the shape of the grip and backstrap is very similar to the early open-top Merwins. This loading gate is like exactly the same as what you would get on a Merwin and Hulbert. Now, it doesn't have the slick ejection extraction system of the Merwin. It just has a loading rod, which we'll look at in a moment. But man, it'd be really easy to mistake this loading gate for a Merwin and Hulbert. There's nothing confusing about the markings, though. This is very clearly on the top strap marked Hopkins Allen, patent, patent date up there, and Model XL8. I should have mentioned No.8. That was the name for this revolver project. They did apply the XL name to a variety of other firearms that they made. So these revolvers are the XL8. The only other markings on here are the serial number. This is number 215. It's marked on the bottom of the barrel where you can't see it under the ejecting rod. And it's also marked right there on the ejection rod itself. There were three different models of the XL8 that were marketed: the Army, the Navy, and the Police. This is an Army. Barrel lengths were negotiable on all of them. Standard lengths were apparently, for the Army, 4.5, 6, and 7.5 inch. This particular one has a 6.5 inch barrel, so perhaps a little bit non-standard there. The Army was available in, it was always 44 caliber, but you could get it either in 44 Henry rimfire or 44 Winchester centerfire, aka 4440. That makes sense given that the Merwin and Hulbert revolvers were also made primarily in 44 Winchester centerfire. That was a common popular cartridge, and those two options, rim and centerfire, would make ideal companion revolvers for partnering an XL8 with either a Henry rifle or a Winchester 1873. The Navy and Police versions were both 38 caliber and available only in rimfire, cartridges. The police had apparently a standard 4.5-inch barrel, the Navy a 6.5-inch. I don't have examples of those to show you. In terms of appearance, like, this is a remarkably modern-looking revolver. Has a top strap on it, so a fully enclosed frame, which gives it a good amount of strength. It looks like it has a swing-out cylinder, but it actually doesn't. What we've got here is just an ejector rod. To open it, you push in this lever to unlock, pull the ejector rod forward, and then it pops out to the side of the cylinder here. Put the hammer at half cock so that it can spin, and you open the loading gate, and then you can pop each of your cartridges out in sequence. To put the ejector rod back, you just push it over and then slide it down into the cylinder axis. You can then continue to reload the gun 1 round at a time, just like a Merwin and Hulbert. Lock that in place, and then you're ready to fire. The easy way to distinguish the rimfire guns from the centerfire, since they're not actually marked as to their caliber, the easy way to differentiate them is by looking at the hammer. That is a rimfire hammer. It hits up at the top of each chamber. A centerfire hammer would look more like a firing pin on the end. We clearly have a number of elements also taken from the Colt single-action army. The sights are very Colt reminiscent. The sight picture is not all that great. There you go. You know, Hopkins and Allen were good businessmen. They understood how to look at the market, see what people wanted, and deliver it. And in theory, this would have been a good combination of features. Now we can get back to the problems that came to Hopkins and Allen as a result of their relatively low-end general production guns. Well, if you're going to go spend real money on what you expect to be a high-quality revolver, are you going to go with Colt or Smith Wesson or Hopkins and Allen? These guys are like the high point of the Old West. Really, you're going to give them big money for a better get? No, you're going to go to Colt or Smith & Wesson. And that's what just about everybody did. The end result being these were in production for like 8 years. Production ended in 1885, although they continued to sell them for a couple years afterwards to get rid of the remaining stock. But they only made a couple hundred of each model. The gun was really a complete commercial failure, largely because of the brand reputation that Hopkins and Allen had built for themselves. So ultimately, the company would go into bankruptcy in 1898. They reorganized with basically a different version of the same name, but they were never able to really get back the really successful business that they'd had in the 1870s and 1880s. Ultimately, the company was sold off in 1914 to Marlin Rockwell, who wanted their production facilities, and at that point it ceased to exist. So this is definitely one of the scarcer examples of a Hopkins and Allen firearm, and one of their better ones. You know, these actually are good guns. Just because the bulk of Hopkins and Allen production was inexpensive and subpar quality doesn't mean they couldn't make good guns. It means they were savvy enough to recognize where it was worth putting in the effort to make something really good and where it wasn't. And that just came back to bite them. So if you'd like to add a really nice Hopkins & Allen Rimfire XL8 Army model to your own collection, check out Rock Island's catalog. You can see their detailed pictures, description, estimate, and everything else about this revolver there, as well as information on all the other items in the auction. Thanks for watching.